Groovy.
Konnichiwa, konnichiwa, Super Famicom. Konnichiwa, konnichiwa, Mario no Banka. Konnichiwa, konnichiwa, Mario no Kuni kara. お尻に火がつく面白さスーパーマリオブラザーズ4スーパーファミコンでいよいよデビュー
Hey everybody, welcome back. Jim here, and today I'm doing a buying guide for the Super Famicom for anyone who's interested in picking one up and maybe getting started with a little import collection. The Super Famicom is actually one of the easier and cheaper systems to start collecting imports for. And I'm doing this because I've seen quite a lot of buying guides on YouTube as of late for a lot of different consoles. Most of them are very good, but I didn't see a lot that cover imports exclusively, so that's why I thought I would start doing these. So let's get started. Yes, the Super Famicom, the console itself, looks rather different from the North American SNES, but looks pretty much identical to the PAL region Super Nintendo. I will say, as far as price goes, if you're going to pick up this original version of the Super Famicom, when you look online, you can look to eBay. I'll put some links in the description as well for some other alternate sources where you can buy import games and maybe use some proxy services as well for shipping. If you're going to pick up the original model of the Super Famicom, I would say don't pay more than 40 or 50 bucks for it. You know, if it's bundled with a controller or two and all the necessary hookups, 40 or 50 bucks is just right, because between you and me, there are a lot of these things floating around out here. They sold like hotcakes. Obviously, it's a Nintendo console. There are going to be a lot of them. So just millions of Super Famicoms lying around. Any shop you go into, a complete Super Famicom in good condition is going to be at max 50 bucks. So I would recommend not paying much more than that. Also, especially if you're in North America, if you already have, and I have them here, the AC adapter or the AV connector. This is the same one that you can use with the Nintendo 64 and the GameCube as well. If you already have these things, you can just buy just the deck itself, because it takes the exact same voltage as a North American Super Nintendo. So if you already have the AC adapter and you have the AV hookups and maybe some Super Nintendo controllers as well, you can just buy a deck by itself, and this shouldn't cost any more than like 25, 30 bucks, just a standalone Super Famicom deck in good condition. That's not including the Super Famicom Junior, which is a different story. It still takes all the same hookups as your North American SNES, but it's more expensive. I would say it's at least 50 to 60 bucks more expensive. So definitely, if you're going to pick up a Super Famicom, pick up the original. Another option you have if you have a North American Super Nintendo is there are pegs in the cartridge slot that you can remove. Your Super Nintendo is basically a region-free console. It just has tiny little plastic pegs in it that physically block the Super Famicom cartridges from being put into the slot. So you can actually remove those and use your SNES just like a Super Famicom. I'm actually going to provide a link in the description to a video from my good buddy Mike Tendo over at the Dongle channel. He has a video up there where he shows you how to safely remove those pegs without damaging your SNES, and then voila, you have a region-free Super Nintendo. So that's the console itself. Again, very cheap, easy to pick it up, and if you don't want to pick it up, you can just go ahead and mod your North American SNES, and you're still good to go. So, that is the console itself. Okay, so we got the hardware section out of the way. Let's move on to the software. So I have 10 games here that I chose that I think would be a great way to start off a Super Famicom collection. So these aren't necessarily the 10 best games on the console, but I chose all of these games for 3 reasons. One is that they are all good games. They're very fun, easy to get into. 2 is that they don't require really any kind of reading or comprehension of Japanese. so you can pick these up, and they are rather English friendly, so you shouldn't have any trouble getting into them. And 3, they're all fairly affordable. I decided not to go over around $40 for loose carts, and at the cheapest, some of these games are like $5. Very affordable, just because if you're going to pick up a console and maybe a handful of games, it's nice to be able to do that without having to spend a ton of money. So all of these games meet all 3 of those criteria. They are fun, they are English friendly, and they are not terribly expensive. And so with that being said, let's get started right off the top. First, we have Gogo Ah Cmon, and if you take a look at the cover art, you should be able to recognize that it's by Akira Toriyama. This is based on a short-lived series of manga and anime that he did called Gogo Ah Cmon. And of course, he created Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump and did art for games like Chrono Trigger and Dragon Quest. This is the first in a series of 3 side-scrolling platformers on the Super Famicom. They're all very good. They play very well. They're fun, really good graphics and sound design, really wacky characters. Lots of power-ups to collect. You have a little demon that flies around you, and he carries a bottle, and for every enemy you defeat, he collects their soul, and you collect enough souls, and you get a 1-up, and you have power-ups like swords and guns and boomerangs and super bombs and all kinds of stuff. So really great gameplay, really great level designs, great boss battles, fun characters, good graphics and sound. You really can't go wrong with Gogo Ah Cmon. And again, this one, very affordable game. You go and take a look online. No more than like $20 for a loose cart, maybe even less than that, $15-20 for a loose cart. A little more expensive for a complete copy for whatever reason. This can be upwards of like $60 to $80 for a complete copy. But for just a loose cart, maybe $15-20, I would say it's worth that. And the 2 sequels are worth that as well. Gogo Ah Cmon, great series of Japan-exclusive platformers on the Super Famicom. Next up, keeping with Akira Toriyama, this is Dragon Ball Z Super Butoden 2, excuse me. This is the second in a series of 3 games. Actually, a whole bunch of Dragon Ball Z games on the Super Famicom. This one, great one to pick up. It's a fighting game, but plays very unlike any other fighting game. Essentially, you can fight up close and personal with your fists and your feet, or of course it's Dragon Ball Z, so you can do lots of really powerful energy blasts and things like that. When you fly far enough away from each other, the game goes split screen, and you can fly up into the air and all around, and then you can launch your energy blasts, and you can do like power struggles with your beams, or you can block or dodge or do things like that, or just take the energy blast to the face if you really want to. That's what a lot of people do when they first start playing this game. Don't know the controls yet, you just start eating Kamehameha waves. But once you figure out the controls, this is a very fun game. Really fun multiplayer as well. Good graphics and sound design, some little voice clips from the Japanese actors and actresses from the show, decent selection of characters with some secret characters to unlock. Super Butoden 2, this is a fantastic game, and another one not terribly expensive. If you pick it up, I would say like $10 for a loose cart. Not very expensive at all. If you pick it up boxed like this, that's only going to be like $20 to $30. Very affordable game. It's Dragon Ball Z, so of course it's sold like hotcakes in Japan. Super Butoden 2, great game to pick up. Next one, and hear me out, you know, a little bit girly, but Bishoujo Senshi Sailor Moon. Obviously based on the series of anime and manga. This is a surprisingly fun beat-em-up. You have 5 different characters to choose from, all of the different Sailor Scouts, and they all have different attacks. I think Sailor Venus is the best because she has her whip, so you can do some long-range attacking. But they all have different attacks. They all have different special attacks and super attacks. Tuxedo Mask even jumps in from time to time to lend you a hand. But it's just a fun, all-around good 16-bit beat-em-up, 2-player co-op. Not a terribly challenging beat-em-up, but still a very fun one. Plenty of boss battles, good graphics, very colorful game, good soundtrack as well. For a Sailor Moon game, I was certainly surprised, and this isn't the only one. There's a sequel that's also a beat-em-up, and there's a bunch of other Sailor Moon games on the Super Famicom. Trust me, if you're a Sailor Moon fan, the Super Famicom has you covered. But this one would be a great one to start with. It's a very fun beat-em-up. And again, another game, not terribly expensive. I would say you're looking at $10, maybe $20 at max for a loose cart, and $30 for a complete in-box copy like this. Sailor Moon, very fun 16-bit beat 'em up, one well worth picking up. Next, another great game based on a series of anime. We should just call this like the Toonami section of the video. This is Yu Hakusho 2 by Namco. Based on, this is a little side note, Yu Hakusho is one of my favorite series of manga and anime ever. I was a big fan of this show when it was airing in the United States. This game is a pretty damn well-made 2D fighter. You have a bunch of different characters to choose from, I would say from like the first half of the show. So you have the 4 central characters, and then you have like Suzaku and Tagoro and some other characters from the Dark Tournament. Really good game, plays well. Each character has a bunch of different special attacks that you can use. There is a story mode, and there's also versus mode, and really tight, decent playing game. Really good graphics. Some of the stages in this look especially nice. The character designs look really good. They do justice to their 2D animated counterparts. So good graphics, good sound design as well. Fun game. If you're a Yu Hakusho fan like me, this is one that you're going to want to have. It's just a good, all-around enjoyable 2D fighter with some really awesome anime licensed characters. Another game that is not terribly expensive. I would say if you go looking for a loose card of this game, $10 at max, maybe less. You might pay even less than $10 for just a loose card of this game. And for a complete copy, I mean, I've seen copies go for as little as $15, at max like $30 for a nice complete copy like this. Yu Hakusho 2, great game, really good 2D fighter, well worth picking up. Next up, decided to throw in some puzzle games for all you puzzle game fans. This one is Ranma 1/2 Ougi Janken. Ranma, another one of my favorite series of manga and anime, and another series where there's no shortage of Ranma games on the Super Famicom game. So if you on the Super Famicom console, excuse me, and if you pick up a Super Famicom, if you're a Ranma fan, again, they've got you covered. This is a very fun puzzle game. Essentially, it's a rock, paper, scissors, Tetris-style puzzle game. So the blocks that fall from the top of the screen are rock, paper, or scissors. So you line them up accordingly so one defeats the other. So you drop them on top of each other, and then you drop balls on top of them and to make them disappear, and then you stack more on your opponent's side. So this is another game like Puyo Puyo, for example, which works very well as like a multiplayer battle puzzle game. So it's very fun, and again, Ranma licensed game, so it has all those characters, and it has voiceovers from the Japanese cast. It has really good, colorful graphics, excellent soundtrack as well. Ranma Ougi Janken, overall just an excellent puzzle game, and if you pick it up, loose carts are about $10 to $20, and complete carts, complete box like this, maybe about $40 to $50, but the loose carts considerably cheap. So Ranma Ougi Janken, great puzzle game for all you puzzle game fans. Next up, this is one that I only started playing recently, but I like it a lot. One of the better, more challenging puzzlers on the Super Famicom. This is Super Gussun Oyoyo, which it's published by Banpresto, but this was actually developed by Irem. And I'm kind of an Irem fan. I like a lot of the games they published in the late 80s and in the 90s. This very interesting puzzle game, as you have a weird little character, this little guy. Basically, he's walking around the screen, and as that's happening, water is rising up from the bottom and blocks are falling from the top, and there's an exit somewhere way up above his head on the screen, and you have to drop these blocks in such a way that you create platforms that he can climb on to make it to the exit, which is a lot easier said than done, because he's kind of just wandering aimlessly all around the stage, so you have to sort of guide him along his way by placing blocks in the appropriate areas. At the same time, little monsters fall from the screen that can kill him, so you got to crush them with blocks or kill them with bombs, but you can accidentally trap your little guy here and get him killed. So really challenging to get this little guy to the exit of each stage, but it is very fun. Very interesting puzzle game, I'll say that. Not like any other puzzle game I've ever played, and I've been enjoying it a lot. Great gameplay, good graphics, good sound design, all around excellent game. Super Gussun Oyoyo, another game that is 10 to 20 bucks for a loose cart, and a complete copy like this probably shouldn't cost you any more than 30 bucks. Great game for puzzle fans. Even if you're not a puzzle fan, this is a really fun, unique game. Next up, and this actually surprised me that we didn't get this in the States, but this is Mickey's Tokyo Disney Adventure, and it's surprising because we got a ton of Mickey games in the States with the Illusion games and Mickey Mania and stuff like that, but this one stayed exclusive to Japan. Essentially what it is, Mickey goes to Tokyo Disney, as the title implies, and it's a platformer. But what you have are a couple of different types of balloons. So you have water balloons that you can use to either attack your enemies, or you can fill them up and use them as springs to reach high up platforms. And you also have helium balloons, which will allow you to sort of float up to various areas, and then when you let the air out, kind of launches you in one direction or the other. So you're alternating between your water balloons and your helium balloons to overcome all kinds of different obstacles. Basically, each stage is set up where you'll always need to use one or the other. So there are plenty of enemies and platforming and obstacles to get around, and there are some like minecart stages and all kinds of stuff. So gameplay, pretty good, solid platformer, good graphics, good sound design, made by Tomy, who typically made good games. I don't think I've ever really played, aside from Fantasia, I've never really played a bad Mickey Mouse game, and this one isn't bad either. Very good game, so if you are a fan of the various Mickey Mouse platformers, this is one you're going to want to pick up. Another game that'll cost you no more than $10 for a loose copy, and about 30 bucks for a complete copy. Mickey's Tokyo Disneyland Adventure, a very good platformer. Next up, we have Shin Nekketsu Kouha Kuniotachi no Banka. And this is a game in the Kunio-kun series of games, which, if you don't know, is the series that includes Super Dodgeball, River City Ransom, Crash and the Boys Street Challenge, and a whole bunch of others. And this game is a prequel to River City Ransom, so it shows you how the characters of Kunio and Ricky come to become friends, because in the original Kunio game, which is Renegade, Ricky is actually one of the boss characters in that game, so he's an enemy. So in this game, Kunio and Ricky are both set up for crimes they did not commit. They are sent to a boys' prison of sorts. So at the start of the game, you break out of prison, and then you go on basically a fighting spree to clear their names. So you go to the various schools, and you fight with all the punks at the schools, and you fight with cops, and you fight all kinds of different places. You get on your motorcycle, just like in Renegades, and you drive down the street and kick over other punks on motorcycles and things like that. So very, very cool, very fun gameplay. There are actually 4 playable characters in this game, because in addition to Kunio and Ricky, eventually their girlfriends join the fight. And so if you're playing single player, you can actually swap between all 4 characters on the fly. And if you're playing co-op, each of you can swap between the 4 characters. So definitely awesome game in the gameplay department. Very fun beat 'em up. Very good graphics. Very good sound design as well. If you're a fan of River City Ransom, this is one you're going to want to play, because again, it is a prequel to that game, and it has sort of a lot of throwback references to Renegade and River City Ransom. So awesome game indeed. This is one of the more expensive games I'm recommending today. Not too expensive, I believe. The loose carts for this game, $30 perhaps, maybe up to $40, which is pushing it a little bit. That's kind of steep for just a loose cart, but this is a great beat 'em up. Again, if you are a fan of this series, it's one you're going to want to play. For the complete copies, though, it is rather expensive, 80 to 100 bucks. So that depends on how much of a collector you are, if you are or not willing to spend that kind of cash. But I would say for like $30 for a loose cart, this game is worth it. It is a fun beat 'em up, and again, great for fans of the series. Shin Nekketsu Kouha Kuniotachi no Banka. Great game for the Super Famicom. Next up, these next two games are both from Enix, and they're both absolutely amazing. First up, this is Nangoku Shonen Papuwa-kun. And this is another game based on a series of manga and anime, one that I am not familiar with at all. But the game itself is a pretty straightforward platformer. You run and jump and, punch and kick enemies, and you can do dive kicks. And you have a limited supply of energy blasts that look like a Kamehameha wave. I would say as far as your attacking abilities go, you can do more in here than you can do in most platformers. Most platformers, you just jump on the heads of your enemies or something like that. Here you can punch and kick and do energy blasts and all kinds of stuff like that. The levels are opened up a little more than in a typical side-scrolling platformer. So there is a little bit of exploration that needs to be done. You need to find keys or activate switches, or there are some times you have to help out a certain character, maybe free them from a cage or open a door up or something like that, and then they'll show up later in the stage to provide platforms or to do something else that allows you to progress through the stage. So there is a bit more exploration, a bit more depth to this game than your average 16-bit platformer, and the graphics are outstanding, really colorful. Beautiful graphics in this game. I like them a lot, and the sound design is awesome too. Kind of a catchy, laid-back soundtrack. A lot of the stages in this game take place on some kind of beach setting or something like that. So the music really matches that. It's really very laid-back and kind of groovy music. So yes, Nangoku Shonen Papuwa-kun. This is an excellent platformer by Enix. One I would highly recommend picking up. And for loose carts, $10 to $20 loose, so not so bad. For complete copies, though, it can be pretty pricey, though. Another one that, for whatever reason, if you buy a complete copy, it can be up to $60 or so. I actually bought mine in a shop here in Japan for about $30. Not terribly expensive, but for whatever reason, online, they are going for a bit more. But Nangoku Shonen Papuwa-kun, if you can find it, loose carts for about $10 or so, or a complete copy for $30 to $40, definitely pick it up. I have the feeling that this is one that collectors are going to be wanting more and more as time goes on, because it's a really great platformer, and usually games like this, people jump all over them because it's very English friendly and it's very fun. Papuwa-kun, great game for the Super Famicom. Last but not least, this is my favorite game of the bunch. This is the Violinist of Hameln, or Hamelin no Violin Hiki. This is another platformer by Enix, and this is actually, since I've started playing it, become one of my favorite platformers on the Super Famicom and SNES. I think it's just great. It is definitely not your typical platformer. Essentially, you have the violinist himself, I believe his name is Hameln, and you have his assistant, which is this young girl named Flute. And she's almost more of like a slave girl or something like that. He sort of abducts her from her village after he saves her village from demons. And essentially, the way this game is played is there is some, traditional straightforward platforming to be done. Just jumping from one platform to the other and defeating enemies. You have your violin, and you shoot out musical notes at your enemies, and you defeat them that way. But for the majority of this game, you have to use Flute in various ways. Basically, you have to put her in harm's way to get yourself around obstacles. So you can stand on her head to just jump up to, hard-to-reach platforms, or you can pick her up and lob her as a projectile as your enemies. You can actually use her as an attack, but all throughout the game, you find various costumes that you can put her in, and each of these costumes gives her different abilities. They might allow her to walk on spikes, or jump up high, like a frog suit that lets her jump high while you stand on her back, or a robot suit that lets her punch down walls that are in your way, a penguin suit that lets her swim through the water, again, while you're standing on her back and she's struggling to swim through the water. Very comedic, this game. It's kind of, there's definitely an abusive relationship going on between the two characters, but it's played comedically, and it actually is kind of funny. So this game, almost more of a puzzle platformer, so you have to use the appropriate suit at the appropriate time, and you have to use Flute in various ways to get around obstacles and defeat bosses and all kinds of stuff like that. And as you play through the game, you collect money and other various items, musical notes and things like that. And by the more you collect, the more your health increases. So you can increase your health and you can increase Flute's durability as well. But yeah, just overall, just a really great game. The gameplay, it's really unlike any other platformer I've ever played. It's very fun, very interesting, very unique, and the graphics are really good. Just a beautiful, very colorful 16-bit platformer. The soundtrack is awesome as well. It has sort of a 16-bit kind of like chiptune symphony sound to it. Which matches with the, I guess, the motif of the, the Violinist of Hamelin and flute and all that kind of stuff. So really great soundtrack, really great graphics, absolutely amazing gameplay. Again, Violinist of Hamelin, of this stack of games, this is my favorite of the bunch. It's one of my new favorite platformers on the entire console. It really is good. I cannot speak highly enough of this game. And if you want a loose cart, not terribly expensive. $30 to $40 for a loose cart, which is kind of steep for something that's loose, but again, it's such a good game. I would recommend paying at least $30 for a loose cart of this. The complete copies, though, those can be rather expensive, upwards of $60 or $70. Again, this is another game that I like Magical Poppin' and Do Re Mi Fantasy. I imagine once more people are aware of this, and I hope I'm not contributing too much to that. This is a smaller channel. I hope not too many people pay attention to what I say, but I think this is one of those ones that collectors are going to be wanting like big time because, again, it's English friendly. It is a very fun platformer and just beautiful graphics and sound. You really can't go wrong with this one. One of the best platformers on the entire console. Violinist of Hamelin. I love it a lot. And that's it. There you go. 10 games to get your Super Famicom collection started. Super Famicom itself, very cheap to pick one of these up online anywhere, or again, you can mod your North American SNES to play Super Famicom games. So there you go. This is a system that you can get into and you can start collecting imports for without spending too much money. There are some really expensive games for this console, just like any other console. Games that are really highly sought after by collectors. But as you can see by this stack of 10 games, there are also really fun games that you can pick up for it that don't cost an arm and a leg. And this is definitely not all of them. Tons of Japan exclusive games for the Super Famicom. Lots of good ones. There are platformers and puzzle games and fighting games and beat 'em ups. And most of them are not terribly expensive. So definitely, if you're thinking about getting into collecting imports, the Super Famicom would be a good console to start with. Not too expensive, not too difficult to find games for it, and not too difficult to find good English-friendly games for it at a reasonable price. So everybody, I hope this was helpful for some of you. Kind of a long-winded video, longer-winded than I typically do, probably stuttering and tripping over my words a lot. But I really would like to help a lot of people who like to play and collect retro games get more into import gaming, because it really can open up this wider world of retro gaming that maybe you didn't know was there. But nevertheless, the games are just as good, if not better, than some of the ones you've been enjoying for however long, 20 or 30 years. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. Get yourself a Super Famicom. Get yourself a handful of Super Famicom games. You will not regret it if you are a retro gamer. Excellent system to collect imports for. Anyway, everybody, thank you for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, etc., etc. And until next time, take care, everybody. Goodbye.